It was said, the perception of death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit, culminating in the deathless, having the deathless as its consummation. For what reason was this said? When you often dwell with a mind accustomed to the perception of death, your mind shrinks away from attachment to life, turns back from it, rolls away from it, and is not drawn toward it, and either equanimity or revulsion becomes settled in you. Just as a cock's feather or a strip of sinew thrown into a fire shrinks away from it, turns back from it, rolls away from it, and is not drawn toward it, so it is in regard to attachment to life, when you often dwell with a mind accustomed to the perception of death. The topic of death is a taboo in many, if not most, parts of the world. So it's not easy to get a good look at what a dying or dead person looks like. Certainly, many movies try to make it look beautiful and peaceful, but it is suffering, and there is much uncertainty as to how the dying process will unfold, as in how fast and painful it all might be. If you find it difficult to accept death, there are a few things that you can do to become more familiar with death. There are videos on YouTube, for instance, documentaries about care facilities that show people that agreed to be filmed that are terminally ill and are dying. Also autopsy videos. And the aim is not to watch out of some disrespectful fascination, of course, but to really let it sink in that we will die. And you will also see then that below someone's perhaps good looks and nice body, there are a skull, flesh, bones, intestines, many organs, and it is filled with urine, feces, blood, and bile. The body is basically a disgusting bag of bones, organs, blood, held together by a skin which is covered with bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and even mites. Watching these autopsies to understand the impermanence of this life and this body also has the additional side effect that it's a quick way of letting go of any lust. You could also practice the corpse meditation, the charnel ground meditation, as laid out in the Satipatthana Sutta. I will now share a picture that is, for some people, quite gruesome. So if you don't want to watch, you can close your eyes and I will alert you for when it's safe to look again. So this charnel grounds meditation is something I have practiced daily before I started doing TWIM. I saw myself on the deathbed with a death rattle, which is a kind of noisy, labored breathing that accompanies the dying process, and imagined myself being in pain, too weak to move. And then after death, imagining myself in the processes that happen in a corpse, the bloating, the oozing, the discoloration, the rotting, up until becoming a skeleton of bleached bones, in the end blown away by the wind, even though we probably end up buried in a casket or as ashes kept in an urn. It's truly a very peaceful kind of meditation and very helpful to keep in mind that life is fragile and death will come, not only for ourselves, but also for all people and animals that we love so much. And never will we know exactly when that moment arrives. So I will stop sharing this picture. Now, this sounds quite gruesome, but part of that is because we don't see death and dying as normal things anymore. We have become completely estranged from this, and it makes it even harder for us to truly understand that this body can pass away at any time. At any time. This might be the last time we will see each other. You or I might keel over from a stroke within this minute. Death can be foreseeable, like in certain illnesses where you have some time to prepare for it, but it can also be completely unexpected, like in an accident or having a heart condition you were not even aware of. The Buddha said, if, when you often dwell with a mind accustomed to the perception of death, your mind inclines to attachment to life, or if you don't turn away from it, you should understand, I have not developed the perception of death. There is no distinction between my earlier condition and my present one. I have not attained the fruit of development. Thus you clearly comprehend this. But if, when you often dwell with a mind accustomed to the perception of death, your mind shrinks away from attachment to life, and either equanimity or revulsion becomes settled in you, you should understand, I have developed the perception of death. There is a distinction between my earlier condition and my present one. I have attained the fruit of development. Thus you clearly comprehend this. When it was said, the perception of death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit, culminating in the deathless, having the deathless as its consummation, it is because of this that this was said. And the deathless is Nibbana, the end of all craving. Another sutta contains a very vivid simile of our impending deaths. This one is called the simile of the mountain. Just as mountains of solid rock, massive, reaching to the sky, might draw together from all sides, crushing all in the four quarters, so aging and death come rolling over living beings. Katyas, Brahmins, Vesas, Sudras, Chandalas, and scavengers, they spare none along the way, but come crushing everything. There is no ground there for elephant troops, for chariot troops and infantry. You can't defeat them by subterfuge or buy them off by means of wealth. Therefore, a person of wisdom here, out of regard for their own good, steadfast, should settle faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. When you conduct yourself by Dhamma with body, speech, and mind, they praise you here in the present life, and after death you rejoice in heaven. Now, why did the Buddha emphasize impermanence and reflection on death so much? There are several reasons for this. First of all, we truly need to fully understand impermanence. Only when we understand that everything is impermanent will we begin to understand that it is impossible to think something permanent can exist based on impermanent building blocks. That is to say, the body is not a static thing, but just a collection of tissues and organs and cells that get formed and die all the time without us even being aware of it. The colonies of bacteria calling the gut their home change at each meal. Certain bacteria thriving because of that apple and others dying. And during each shower, countless microorganisms are flushed down the drain. And actually, the body is just a collection of vibrating atoms and molecules and even smaller particles, surrounded by a huge amount of space. The body is more space than matter, and this is why the Buddha called form or compared form with foam. These particles are not even there for a long time because these two constantly arise and disappear, get discarded, form into new molecules depending on the needs of the body, the food we eat, the fluids we drink, and the air we breathe. So how can there be a self in any of that? The mind is in some way similar to a movie. These mental processes play at tremendous speed so that we feel like there is one continuous awareness. But the mind is not even a thing, it's a concept. There are only endless amounts of mental formations and perceptions, feeling, mindfulness, thoughts, sense consciousnesses that arise and pass away, you name it, and they keep changing, dependent on what we pay attention to and dependent on the sense contact we experience. So how can we believe that somewhere in there is something permanent to be found, be it a soul, an eternal consciousness, something that is somehow part of the universe, which is also impermanent and will not exist forever? When we understand the impermanent nature of everything, we will start to understand suffering at a deeper level too. After all, nowhere is there any stability, any safety. Objects are impermanent. Situations and experiences are impermanent, and people and relationships as well. Everything keeps changing and will eventually disappear. It's like we spend our whole lives standing on a sinkhole that will collapse at one time, but we will not be able to understand when that will be. So when nothing lasts forever and you see that they are causing suffering and we are not in control of anything at all, what then would we consider a self that is permanent and eternally happy? We would certainly not want to create suffering. Another reason is that the Buddha wanted to arouse spiritual urgency in us, samvega. He explained that the human realm is very special. Yes, it contains plenty of suffering, but nothing compared to the hell realms, where there is not even some relief in between the suffering. The human realm also contains many pleasant experiences, but not as many as in the higher realms that are so joyful and pleasant that beings there just don't feel the need to practice, particularly when they mistakenly assume they will live forever. So this human realm is the most conducive to our practice. Unfortunately, it is also very, very rare to be born as a human. The Buddha said in this sutta, suppose someone would throw a yoke with a single hole into the great ocean, and there was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think? Would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into the yoke with a single hole? If it would ever do so, Venerable Sir, it would be only after a very long time. Sooner, I say, would that blind turtle, coming to the surface once every 100 years, insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole, than the fool who has gone once to the netherworld, so the hell realms, would regain the human state. For what reason? Because here there is no conduct guided by the Dhamma, no righteous conduct, no wholesome activity, no meritorious activity. Here there prevails mutual devouring, the devouring of the weak. For what reason? Because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the cause of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, union with what is displeasing is suffering, separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. This is the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there, that is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. This is the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. An exertion should be made to understand this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering, namely the Eightfold Path. Even if we get to live to 120 years or so, a human life is still very short. It arises and passes away in an instant, which we will clearly understand when we die. And when we don't practice, we will continue in the wheel of samsara, of rebirths forever. And while we might behave decently enough in this life, there is no guarantee that in other rebirths we will also behave in wholesome ways, or that we have led wholesome lives in the past, because there are plenty of results of actions, so karma, from this and previous lives that will come to fruition at some point that might not be so nice. In other words, chances are that rebirths will present themselves where one ends up as an animal, as a spirit, or in the hell realms, which are way more terrible than the human realm could ever be. The Buddha said that if life was exclusively pleasant, he would not have started teaching. But we never have a guarantee of evading unpleasant realms unless we practice and attain at least stream entry. Stream entry, becoming a sotapanna, is the first stage of nibbana. 3 of 10 fetters get forever eradicated, namely the fetter of doubt in the Buddha, the practice, the Dhamma, and not understanding what is wholesome or unwholesome, the fetter of a belief that rites and rituals, certain behaviors can lead to nibbana, and the fetter that believes in an eternal self in any way or form. And the destruction of these 3 fetters is already enough to not be reborn in lower than a human realm ever again. We get reborn in the human realm or in a higher realm for at most 7 lifetimes, with a guarantee that within 7 lifetimes we will attain full awakening, arahantship. We will get off the wheel of samsara. So we need to practice as if our head is on fire, as the Buddha said in the next sutta. The Blessed One said this, and how are you skilled in the ways of your own mind? It is just as if a woman or a man, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would look at her or his own facial reflection in a clean, bright mirror or in a bowl of clear water. If they see any dust or blemish there, they will make an effort to remove it. But if they do not see any dust or blemish there, they will be glad about it, and their wish fulfilled, they will think, how fortunate that I'm clean. So too, self-examination is very helpful for you to grow in wholesome qualities. You should ask yourself, am I often given to longing or without longing? Am I often given to ill will or without ill will? Am I often overcome by dullness and drowsiness or free from dullness and drowsiness? Am I often restless or calm? Am I often plagued by doubt or free from doubt? Am I often angry or without anger? Is my mind often defiled or undefiled? Is my body often agitated or unagitated? Am I often lazy or energetic? Am I often not collected or collected? If by such self-examination you know I am often given to longing, given to ill will, overcome by dullness and drowsiness, restless, plagued by doubt, angry, defiled in mind, agitated in body, lazy and uncollected, you should put forth extraordinary desire, effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefatigability, mindfulness, and clear comprehension to abandon those same bad, unwholesome qualities. Just as one whose clothes or head had caught fire would put forth extraordinary desire, effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefatigability, mindfulness, and clear comprehension to extinguish the fire on their clothes or head, so too you should put forth extraordinary desire, effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefatigability, mindfulness, and clear comprehension to abandon those same bad, unwholesome qualities. But if by such self-examination you know I am often without longing, without ill will, free from dullness and drowsiness, calm, free from doubt, without anger, undefiled in mind, unagitated in body, energetic and collected, you should base yourself on those same wholesome qualities and make a further effort to reach the destruction of the taints. The Buddha said that we should not practice as if we could die next week. We should not even practice as if we might die today. We should practice as if the next breath might be our last, or the next bite of food. Because we might get injured in an accident or get a stroke that leaves us in a coma or dead, or with such brain damage that we can't practice anymore. I'm sure we all know of examples where these things happened. One moment the person was alive, the next moment they were unconscious in a hospital or gone forever. Another thing the Buddha said was that we need to continue to practice on our deathbed, and that might not be as easy as we think since we can drop dead instantly before we realize what is happening, or because we are in a lot of pain, or we are getting medication that severely affects the mind. So the best things we can do are twofold. Practice now, the regular practice that we do, the 6 hours with the use of the Brahma Viharas. Because the more we practice, the more the mind inclines to the wholesome, the good. It becomes more and more automatic. And then at death, our chances are much better that the final link of formations, the carriers of karma that come to fruition and start the next rebirth, will also consist of wholesome formations, thus leading to nibbana, which can absolutely happen at death too, or at the very least a good rebirth, where hopefully someone might reteach us the Dhamma, should we have forgotten about it. Because if we practice a lot, the mind will already be inclined toward the good. Even in the case that we will die without having time to realize it or to practice letting go in that final moment, the mind already will be wholesome. But by practicing, it should be stated that this is not only to sit for a few times a day. It means to practice all day long, radiating to yourself and to your spiritual friend, if that is your current practice, or radiating to all beings. And letting go 6 hours every time you notice the mind starts to take something personal, craves something, is upset or excited about something. And with some practice, you can do that all the time, even when at work, or when you are surrounded by screaming toddlers, or driving a car, whatever the case may be. The second thing we can do to prepare is that we practice preparing for death on a regular basis, meaning, for instance, a couple of times a week, sincerely imagining that we are dying. Contemplate first and then prepare for death by meditating on death. This way we will get insights into the 3 characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and the impersonal nature of conditioned reality and unconditioned reality as well. All things that arise from causes and conditions are impermanent, be it a thought or joy or this body or the entire universe. If all these things are impermanent, there is nothing that is safe to hold on to. This means that impermanence is and will lead to suffering as long as we don't let go. If all these things are suffering or will lead to suffering, how then can we claim that there is a self in any of that? Because why would we want suffering? We want only nice and pleasant things. And if we were in control, like we often mistakenly think, we would be happy from birth on, and we would only experience nice things. Because we don't want to get sick, age, and die. We don't want to break up with the love of our life or be stuck with unloving parents. We want to live forever, forever happy. But because everything is impermanent, no matter how hard we try, we don't have any control over anything. So how can we see these things as part of a self or seeing it as mine? Also, when we regularly practice and reflect on our upcoming death, we will have less chance that we will be in a state of utter panic in the moments when we are actually dying, because we will know what to do, even in our final moments, namely to die with a wholesome mind. That means dying without regrets, without worries about leaving our loved ones behind, without sadness or resistance to the fact that we are dying. Accept that we can't take our belongings with us, and not even our name is ours. Die without hate and resentment for the people that we associate with traumatic or unpleasant periods in our lives. It means dying with a happy, accepting, and selfless mind that is rooted in the three characteristics and that takes nothing personal, not even life, not even death, not even the body, not even these fleeting mind states. If we do that, we can absolutely experience Nibbana in our final moment too.